Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Joining me in the studio is Professor AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and of course, CHIKE OGEAH, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State. Well, Nigeria has recorded 160 new cases of COVID-19 in the country. This brings the total number of confirmed cases to 56,177, according to the Center for Disease Control. Meanwhile, 44,088 persons have been discharged and 1,078 have died from the virus. Meanwhile, it's 6 months into the COVID-19 pandemic. How much has changed in terms of testing in Nigeria? Arise News Amaka Ude in the special report visits the National Reference Laboratory of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control in the nation's capital, Abuja, to assess the situation.
Of the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria, this National Reference Laboratory used to service all 19 states in Nigeria, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. All samples from all of those states were brought here. But now, with 69 laboratories scattered all across the country, the National Reference Laboratory, still gets some sample from some states who have spills, because the capacity of this lab is still the biggest. Nigeria's strategy for the management of COVID-19 has always been test, treat and isolate, with testing being identified as the first step in the containment of the virus. The national strategy has seen some modifications.
National strategy was focused on making sure that every state has a PCR to be able to test. And that we've been able to achieve up to some level. At the moment, we have only one state that doesn't have the capacity to test. But then, as we went ahead, there's also the second idea of making sure that we use a low-throughput gene expert. Gene expert was already in country, used for TB, using the high-throughput equipment that we've already seen, the COBAs, and then the other one that is not existent here, the Abbott machine. These are two machines that can do a large number of tests in a day, and they were earlier brought in country for the PEPFAR program for HIV. But there are now tests that can be used for COVID on the same machines. And we are able to use these machines to also increase our capacity to test for COVID. So those who are coming into the country will also need testing. What we have done is to prioritize this level of testing to go to the private laboratory establishments, where people will now have to, pay and get these services so that they can free up our public health laboratories to continue on the free testing that we have done for the purpose of surveillance.
Nigeria has the capacity nationwide to test up to 15,000 samples per day, with this facility alone having a 3,000 test capacity. Nevertheless, only an average of between 600 and 1,500 samples are tested daily. Nigeria has seen a drastic decline in the number of samples collected in 32 states in the last month. Experts say the fear in the early stage of the pandemic is gone, and a new strategy is required to improve testing.
Initially, when COVID came up, there was this fear. People were afraid and all that. But it looks like the success we've had in terms of morbidity and mortality, which I also attribute a lot to the response of the federal government. A lot of our people do not feel scared as they would have, and then would have been able to present themselves voluntarily for testing. We are also working hard with the states to actually go out and find the clients. Like I said at the beginning, every person who had a little fever, based on the fear, would go out and seek a test. But now people are rather, they've gone back to the old way of trying to manage their ailments the same way they used to do it before. So we now need a much more active method of case finding. So that's why we are discussing with the states at our level to increase activities, increase surveillance activities, to pull in people originally who would have come on their own, but now who feel that they don't have any symptoms and they don't have any reason to test. And again, it's because there is need to let people understand that you don't need to have simple symptoms to test for COVID.
There is at least one testing center in 35 states and the FCT. However, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control has continued to lead the public health response, working closely with all states to support their response to the pandemic.
Primarily, our responsibility is to support. We want states to own these activities, and then NCDC supports them. We continue to provide technical assistance. There's no doubt molecular testing, COVID, and the information around it are completely novel to us. So NCDC makes sure that they work with the states to cascade information that we get globally in terms of global technical best practices, even in testing, by training the people who do the testing in each of these labs that we open. So if you look at it, you'll find out that every information about COVID that is being reported real time from the states, from the field, are all updated here. Now, SOMAS is available in not all the states of the Federation, so that's why we still use manual data capturing in some states. But NCDC had this strategy to adopt this SOMAS even before COVID came. And we are slowly rolling out from state to state before we are caught up by COVID and the lockdown. So we couldn't get all our states ready to use this.
The frontline health workers are not left out in the infection of COVID-19. With no end in sight for the pandemic, fatigue has set in.
Yes, we've had a number of cases. I think like 8 of us got exposed to the infection, yes, so we had to stop work and isolate at home while being on treatment. And after 2 to 3 weeks, we resumed. Basically, we just try to do our work and work within the time range, and then after we go home to rest.
The United Nations warns that the decline in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is a collapse in testing and not a sign that the virus is being contained. It says for Nigeria to contain the pandemic, increased testing must be a priority. Amaka Ude, Arise News.
Well, 6 months after the first index case was reported in Nigeria, we're now announcing 56,177 cases, 44,000 persons have recovered. We've recorded over 1,000 deaths, about 1,078. How have we fared since then? I mean, on March 30 at 11 p.m., the President of Nigeria announced the lockdown of Lagos, Ogun, Kano, and then the FCT. But later we saw that being extended to other parts of the country. By April 27, a curfew was imposed on different parts of the country from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. By May 4, however, we were already talking about the gradual easing of the lockdown in the FCT in Lagos and Ogun State. Then by June, we already had the third phase of the lockdown up to July 1, and then all of that has been, that second phase of the easing of the lockdown has been extended at least about twice, for 4 weeks. But generally, if you look around Nigeria, some people are saying that it looks like life has returned to normal. And the people, after the initial fear that COVID-19 occasioned, have just gone ahead with their lives in various sectors of the economy. It's even so striking that these days, you don't see anybody wearing any mask in most places. The parties have resumed. The country is opening up. International flights have resumed. Domestic flights have resumed. But what's our assessment of what we've been able to do here at home within the past 6 months, and what are the fears or challenges going forward? We've been told that we have the capacity to test about 15,000 samples on a daily basis, but even then, the argument is that we could do more, particularly when you compare the rate of testing to what we have in other African countries, particularly South Africa, Morocco, and let's add Algeria. Well, Chike, let me start with you.
Well, as usual, you've come in fully loaded. But the whole idea is to just look at the trajectory of where we were when this whole pandemic started to where we are now. And I'll start by saying I give kudos to the government for the handling of this pandemic. Absolutely. They have done a good job. It was something very strange, something we never knew what it was like in this climate. Nigerians being very restless and active people, you know, it was a constant fight between livelihood, recreation, and lives, as it were. So that struggle, we needed to keep finding a balance. And from the beginning, when it was more like testing, treatment, and isolate, well, we went through all of that. Of course, we had our major inadequacies in our testing capacity, which we kept on trying to ramp up. You know, initially they said until you felt bad before you should go and test, you know, so a lot of people didn't have to go anywhere. Then we found out that you could be asymptomatic, i.e. you feel very well, but you actually have the virus in you. And then, you know, we kept on trying to increase our capacity. But be that as it may, like I said, I think I'd said that in one other program we had before. I think it has to do with the immunity, you know, in Africa that has been built up over the years, using quinine for different kinds of things like malaria, like fevers we've had. And I think that helped, you know, the kind of herd immunity we started realizing we had, because definitely the prediction was much worse than, you know, what it turned out to be. Like you rightly said, we have been going through this phased and gradual easing of the lockdown from a total lockdown, more or less, to the partial lockdowns, so that, you know, a country where the informal sector is so active and we have a lot of people depending on daily work, we had to actually do that, because I can imagine how many people have died from so many other causes other than COVID-19 while we were trying to, you know, protect ourselves from COVID-19. But like I said, looking at the trajectory to where we are now, which is now the opening of the ports and another movement of people all around the world, this poses, of course, a new kind of challenge. But I'm happier that we have more capacity, we have learned more about the virus, how they intend to track, because there's a lot of confusion still coming into the ports. How when people come in, some people, their passports are being seized at the airport, then they say go home, go and bring another test. When you know we are clear, and they will have taken tests in their point of destination and all of that. So there's still a lot of confusion, and I think we need to be clearer about that. And then once we can do that, you know, then we can have a way of tracking, because you see, we still need to track. We've gone into the community phase now, so really, you know, it's all open, it's all in the air now, but we still need to track, we need to test, then we need to isolate in cases, and of course, we need to treat.
Well, Prof, CHIKE has raised a very important point, which is the relatively low prevalence of COVID-19, not just in Nigeria, but Africa, taken together when you compare Africa, the continent, with other parts of the world. You recall that Melinda Gates, I think it was, who had said that, look, Africa could be the real problem as far as COVID-19 is concerned, but that has not happened. And there are many scientists who have been trying to explain this, why this is so, and that's one of the explanations that CHIKE, you know, referred to. This belief that the people in Africa, having been exposed to one form of virus or the other, had developed very strong T cells and immunity against the disease. But here in Nigeria, I mean, what is the problem? Initially, we were talking about communication with the people, and we were saying government should look at its communication strategy. But we can't blame the presidential task force or the state governments again about communication strategy, because I think people are aware of it. It's just that they just don't care. They can't be bothered. Whereas in some other countries where they are having second wave, third wave, as in Hong Kong, they are imposing very strict sanctions. In the UK, you know, if you are found in a group of more than 6, you pay a fine of £100. And if you are a repeated offender, you could pay as much as £3,500 as a penalty. Britain is also shutting down some communities just to protect the people from themselves. Why are Nigerians so suicidal, if I may say so?
Well, unlike CHIKE, I do not have any kudos to give to government, and I do not want to withhold any kudos. The major problem with CHIKE's point is that he made a very good point. And it becomes very difficult to challenge a good point. You see, scientifically, let's look at the issue quantitatively. You did tell us now that in the past 6 months, we've been making all these efforts, one after the other. You did tell us that the number of tests, 440,248. So, in a period covering 6 months, we were only able to test 440,248. You did tell us again that our scientists, our experts, specialists, have the capacity, they claim to have the capacity to test up to 15,000, if not more.
I do.
Now, if you multiply 15,000 times 30 days, averagely, that will give you 450,000, which means that in a given month, they have the capacity to have people tested to the tune of 450,000.
No, Prof. No, we must note this. We had challenges initially, and the Presidential Task Force and various state governments made this very clear. At a point, we didn't even have testing kits until Jack Ma Foundation came to our rescue. At a point, the problem was reagents. That again was a problem. Lagos State really publicized that. At another point, it was a crisis with hospitals' bed spaces. And, hoteliers were approached to assist government, and many of the hotel owners said no, they didn't want their hotels to be stigmatized. So it was a journey getting to this ability to test up to 15,000 per day. Initially at the time, we didn't even have more than 3 laboratories.
Now that we have
Prof,
more than
that is the reality.
Now that we have more than 3 laboratories, if you can educate me further, how many tests have we carried out in the last 4 weeks, 1 month? The point I'm trying to make here, if we are talking about progress, whether we are trying or not trying, is largely a function of the fact that people are not forthcoming, they are not coming out for any test. The report that we listened to, it's made clear that people now engage more in self-management. And we are also told that whether or not you have any symptom, that the ideal thing is for you to go for tests. But people are not going. And if, as we have been told, that one can still have COVID-19 without being asymptomatic, you may not have the symptom. You may not have fever. You may not have cough. You will still have it.
And then you become a super spreader.
So in this case, there's nothing to suggest that Nigeria is not playing host to the highest number of COVID-19 carriers. We don't have any proof. So that's why I say that, look, while our commissioner has reflected and given us one scientific point according to which we have a special immune system, we black people, we are strongly built, and we are able to resist. In fact, it's telling us that we have a higher level of resistance to whatever virus. As much as I want to agree with that one, that does not mean that it is true. The number we are giving may not reflect the situation and reality on the ground.
Well, you are correct in that regard. Even the global numbers may not exactly reflect the actual figures.
Definitely. And the truth is this, Prof. The bottom line is, if these infections are really out there, then we should have seen some deaths from it over the period. We have not seen any deaths. So that tells us that, they are really not there. Fine, there might be a lot of asymptomatic people like you talked about. But remember that at the beginning of the journey, people were even discouraged from coming to waste people's time when you're not feeling ill? Why are you coming to test? We already have a challenge with this. That was the narrative at that time.
Another good point.
You know? So these are the
Which
things.
is this issue of using Africans as samples, quote and unquote. They want to test their vaccine. We have one vaccine that has been going viral. It is clearly stated that this vaccine is not for use in Europe, in Canada, in America, and so on and so forth. So it is specifically meant to be tried, to be used, to be purchased in Africa or in Asia.
Well, what we know, Prof, is that the WHO has not approved any vaccine yet.
That's right.
There's no known cure, no known vaccine yet. What is happening is that there are many vaccines that are going through various stages of clinical trial.
Yeah.
Phase 3 trials in Russia, where they say they have a Sputnik 5, the United Kingdom, where AstraZeneca and the Oxford University are working together. And then, of course, in the US,
your observation
and in France, and Germany.
Is made on the basis of normal circumstance. There is no circumstance that is normal in international relations. People are coming out with their own vaccine and they are talking about that. Now, no one will wait for the World Health Organization to encourage them or to prevent them when all these things are being smuggled.
But Prof, you know, the irony I find in this whole thing, not what you said is basically the truth, but the irony I find is that they have a problem in America and in Europe, a bigger problem, South America, with looking for a vaccine. Why are they bothering about us who are even doing better?
Precisely, that's
so
it.
it's neither here nor there to me. It's neither here nor there.
In any case, I think the expectation
No,
of
they
the world-
should look for a vaccine for themselves.
Sure that the vaccine will be very effective. They say where you have a larger concentration of patients. So
Well,
this time,
but Prof, the truth is that trials have been carried out in many places, in Russia, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, and you have the big pharmaceutical companies, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, which the Nigerian government had been talking to, BioNTech, and a number of Chinese companies, also in India. So there is a race for the vaccine, even if there is a downside of it, vaccine nationalism. But we hope that at the end of the day, the point made repeatedly by the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Ghebreyesus, will be what will prevail: global solidarity and then caution in spite of the race, because there's been a lot of criticism about the Russians trying to push a vaccine through without going through all the processes. AstraZeneca, after initially suspending the trials of the vaccine that they were working on, after a patient reported certain side effects, they've now resumed the trial. So let's see what happens. Hopefully by November or before the end of this year, maybe we'll have a vaccine.
But I think,
and that will put the rest of humanity at rest.
I think we should anchor this on the fact that Nigerians should be aware that we are not out of the woods at all. That the threat is still out there. We must up our guards. We must continue to do all the things, the protocols, wash our hands, wear our face mask everywhere, avoid crowds, with this political season.
Excellent point there.
Okay.
Every citizen, whether Nigerian or anywhere else, must take responsibility. The protocols, the guidelines are still applied. You wash your hands, you avoid crowd, you maintain physical distancing, social distancing, and you wear the mask. You mask up. In Lagos State, there is a mask up campaign, and internationally it's been established that wearing the mask will reduce the risk involved in exposing oneself in different situations. It's time now for a break here on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me now in the studio are Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, CHIKE OGEAH, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State, and YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, let's take the next topic quickly. This is also of considerable interest. In recognition of the government's inability to meet its Vision 2020 goals, years after the country embarked on an ambitious agenda to become one of the top 20 economies in the world by this year, President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday in Abuja inaugurated a National Steering Committee to oversee and actualize the Nigeria Agenda 2050 and medium-term National Development Plan. Conceived by former President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2006, the blueprint for Nigeria's Vision 2020 was eventually launched in 2009 with two broad objectives that included making efficient use of human and natural resources to achieve rapid economic growth and to translate the economic growth into equitable social development for all citizens. Ever since, Nigeria has had two successive administrations, each having its own economic growth plan. Under President Goodluck Jonathan, the transformation agenda was a mantra, while for President Buhari, it was the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP. Both plans focus on achieving the goals of Vision 2020 by this year. But in a bid to ensure continuity and efficiency in the country's development planning, Buhari has now set the ball rolling for a new development agenda with the year 2050 as the target. Having named Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and Mr. Atedo Peterside as the co-chairpersons of the National Steering Committee for the Development of Successor Plans to Vision 2020 and ERGP, President Buhari noted that the main objective of these plans is to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within the next 10 years. This was set against the backdrop of the World Bank's projection that Nigeria will become the world's third most populous country by 2050 with over 400 million people. With the new agenda the government has set for Nigeria's development, is the date more realistic? Should more emphasis be laid on implementation? Well, Prof, I'll start with you. I mean, we hear this all the time, Vision 20 this, Vision whatever, growth plan 2017 to 2020. Well, you cannot blame a government for thinking ahead, for planning ahead. But the question is, what happened to previous plans? What was the level of achievement? Are there measurable outcomes? Or we're just going to have another talk shop where, you know, Nigerians will talk and talk and talk and come up with a document which a future government may even decide not to even take a look at. Prof.
I think we have problem. Agenda 2050. How do we relate it with the African Union Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063? Because we cannot have a national agenda that will not reckon with the continental agenda. First point. Agenda 2050, I think, is unnecessarily coming too late. In the next 10 years, President Buhari will not be there. One, at best, is succeeding government may be required to implement what he might have put in place. But look, we had Agenda 2010. Let's go back to the time of Sani Abacha and all those people. Now, you rightly recall the transformation agenda under Goodluck Jonathan. You reminded us about the economic recovery and the growth plan under President Buhari. Now you are coming to talk about 2015 and you ask me what had happened to past agenda. You see, we have always been making changes within continuity. Continuity of the same problem. Dilemma of implementation. I think Nigeria's problem is not about agenda setting. Agenda 2050 is necessarily limited to economic considerations. But the scope, the magnitude of the problem in Nigeria is more than that. I think there is the need for the planners to look at the type of Nigeria we want to have in 2050. There is the need to focus and discuss that first of all. We need to even ask, by 2050, will there be Nigeria by 2050? Now, if there will be Nigeria in 2050, what type of Nigeria? So this is very critical. You see, the situational reality on ground in Nigeria of today, as we are looking at it, I think we need to have people who will conceive of a grand strategy. And by that, if we are able to do that, we can now discuss Agenda 2050 within the framework of that.
Well, Yemi, quickly, we have just about 3 minutes to go. I'd like to take your comment on Agenda 2050.
In the interest of full disclosure, I'm actually a member of one of the working groups, or thematic working groups for Agenda 2050. And as has been said, I believe it's coming a bit late. This is the end of Vision 2020. I think we'll have started planning a lot earlier. And secondly, I think a plan that looks at Nigeria at 100, so 2050 Nigeria will be 90. I think a plan that looks at Nigeria at 104, so Vision 2060 would have been a bit more significant. And then lastly, just really as a country, just clarity around the mode of economy we want to run would also influence significantly what kind of development plans we're putting on the table.
Okay, quickly, let me take CHIKE. CHIKE.
For me, and I said this before, I think the critical thing, let's even leave the military government Prof alluded to. Let's start from when we had an accountable government, which was in 1999, when President Obasanjo came in. And it's because we have jettisoned, like I said, our rolling plans. You see, every country should have a PRSP, which is your poverty reduction strategy paper, which now gives you that 20, 30 year, planning as a long-term rolling plan. And you see, the minute we jettisoned all these things, that is where we got into this problem. Every government coming in and saying, talking about its own agenda. And that will not work, because we have this kind of stop-start. No. Development should be, whether it's whether it's a PDP government, whether it's an APC government, we should have a general roadmap. Look, we started with needs. I worked on needs with Professor Soludo at that time, because I was still in the National Planning Commission, and it was a great poverty reduction strategy paper, which took into cognizance all aspects of our economy. That is what should have been developed upon all this time. I know the amount of work that went into needs, and it's personally very painful to me to think that whole document has just been consigned to the history.
Well, we have so many documents that nobody even bothers to look at. I doubt if there is anything new or original that will come out of this process. But, as a nation, we have to continue to plan, to think ahead, and possibly also to think out of the box. But the long-term test is how we deliver on those objectives. Well, we'll continue to discuss this matter. It's of great interest to Nigerians. It's time now for a break here on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with me in the studio are Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and CHIKE OGEAH, former Commissioner for Information Data State of Nigeria. Gentlemen, before we take the next topic, I just saw this beautiful report as we were discussing 6 months after COVID-19 in Nigeria. And it's the Thisday Style section, which talks about saving lives, restoring hope, Amazons against COVID-19. And the newspaper names some of the persons who have been in the front line of the battle against COVID-19 in Nigeria. They include Jumoke Babatunde, Kemilade Inde, Chibuzo Ene, Abiola Fashino, Fiona Braka, Alerod Roberts, Adejumoke Akure, Bossede Afolabi, Ngozi Onya, and Tochi Okwa. But of course, before this, Thisday had also done heroes of COVID-19, showing, drawing attention to those individuals, either in the presidential task force or in the private sector, who contributed a lot. And I think that these are persons that should be commended. And we should also commend all the frontline health workers in the various isolations and treatment centers, doctors, consultants, persons who have had to make the necessary sacrifice so that Nigeria can control the COVID-19 pandemic. But Chike, as you said, before we went off air, there's still a lot more to be done, particularly in terms of people taking responsibility for their lives. Well, let's move on quickly to another subject, and this is about, again, deregulation of the downstream sector in the oil and gas sector. As the controversy over the removal of subsidy on petrol rages, the issue of palliatives to ameliorate the impact of the fuel price hike and Nigeria's moribund refineries have again been brought to the front burner. This stems from the fact that Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer and the 12th largest in the world. And yet, Nigeria has the ignominious reputation of being the only producer and exporter of crude oil globally that has to import 100% of its refined petroleum products. The consequence is that the bulk of the country's foreign exchange earnings from crude oil exports is utilized to bring in refined products. What is worse is that Nigeria's 3 incapacitated, loss-making refineries, with a combined capacity of 445,000 barrels per day, continue to incur administrative expenses running into several billions of naira annually. In order to address this anomaly, the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, Mele Kyari, unfolded plans last week to privatize the plants by selling a majority stake in each of the refineries to co-investors. But shortly after Kyari's announcement, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timothy Silva, countered the NNPC boss when he said with deregulation, the federal government will fix the refineries to make them commercially viable and create more jobs for Nigerians. Now, this back and forth over the refineries. You'll recall that when the withdrawal of fuel subsidy was announced, and the explanation that this will help us save money up to about 1 trillion naira annually, and that the subsidy regime was unsustainable. Many Nigerians had raised one technical question. They asked, okay, why don't we get the refineries working? Some people argued that, look, whether you have the refineries working or not, it wouldn't make any difference in terms of the pump price of petrol. But what is disturbing is to find the NNPC boss saying one thing, saying the way to go is to privatize, and the Minister of State for Petroleum saying that government will fix the refineries and make them viable in order to create jobs for many Nigerians. And we see this often in government. The minister will say one thing, another spokesperson of government will say another thing. But that's one leg of it. The second leg of it is, do we need to really get the refineries working? Chike, let me start with you.
Yeah, the country was hit with a triple whammy, if you ask me, at the same time. And that's how we got to this sorry pass. We had a global pandemic. We had a slump in oil price.
Creating a revenue problem.
That's right. And we're a monoproduct economy. And then finally, we have this situation of this archaic and I don't know what you call them. Those refineries are not even fit for purpose anymore. That is the truth. When were those refineries built? I'm sure the technology for building refineries today would not encapsulate what we have in Warri, the two Warris, and the two Port Harcourts, Warri and Kaduna. I'm very sure of that. So the truth is that, whether we like it or not, we have a major problem. And at this stage, and at this point, we need to really put up our thinking caps. What are we going to do with that refinery? Like I said, I was interjecting while you were talking. one thing that would seem to have been the hallmark of this government is their policy inconsistency and the fact that we're having, you know, two different directives or, you know, from different aspects of the government. We're always finding agencies working at cross purposes of ministers and heads of agencies and all of that. And hey, it's been 5.5 years or so. I thought, yeah, they've never been in government and, you know, they didn't maybe really understand what it was all about, aluta for them. And now they are here, and I think they're still trying to find out what governance is all about. And that is why, you know, they are very lucky because Nigerians have been beaten and, you know, we have our backs on the wall. Because everything they are doing today was the same thing that brought them into government to correct. That was what they were shouting about. I remember when the Jonathan government did a little, not even as much as this, to hike the price of petroleum products. We saw everybody going to Freedom Park, or was it wherever they went to, and all the you know. So the truth is that this government has to decide whether we want free enterprise in the sense that are we going the way of full deregulation, in which case we will decide what we're doing. But they have to sensitize the people and they have to provide palliatives for the poor. You see, this government came in as a pro-poor government. Even if you are taxing the better 10%, 5% well-to-do, it is better. But when these same things, these adjustments are going to affect the poor, then you will lose the whole plot. So how do you want to do it? Do you want to have different grades of petrol that you're going to sell for different people? You know, do you sell at a special price to the union people that run transportation services, whereby we, the car owners and all that, will be the ones that will buy at a higher price? No. What do we do?
CHIKE,
they have to reason it all out.
Market forces
for everybody
would determine all of that.
But then
that's what they're saying.
There will be a big problem because Nigerians are coming out of a pandemic. Nigerians have very low purchasing powers right now. Even those of them that were managing to eke out a living, they have fallen short of where they should be. Many businesses have collapsed, and at the same time, you want to hit them with a fuel price. I pray God will help them.
Well, government has done it already, and it looks like it's a fait accompli. But civil society is complaining, even apart from the people. And, you know, by Tuesday, we understand that there will be a meeting between Labour, CSOs, and the federal government of Nigeria to discuss these same issues. But at this point, let me invite to join the conversation YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. YEMI, good to see you. Well, YEMI, you've been following the conversation. After subsidy removal, what next? Should there be palliatives for the people? Are there options that the government can consider to make life easier for the people? And then, of course, government agencies have been saying nobody should protest, not even students. What do you say to this? You are a strong member of the civil society group in Nigeria.
I mean, starting point, the right to protest is enshrined in our constitution. So, I mean, the Buhari administration has been quite trying to find a nice word for it, but they've been quite irresponsible, if I want to use that word, in their implementation of the terms of the constitution that allows Nigerians to air out their views. Freedom of association, freedom of speech is enshrined in our constitution. And again, the administration hasn't been one to follow the rule of law, which is why when the Chief Justice of Nigeria mentioned it at the NBA conference a few weeks ago, I thought it was quite laughable. But if we start from that, I think even clamping down or cracking down on the willing or the desire of citizens to express their frustration via protest would actually do more harm for the administration that's trying to manage a tricky situation, if I'll say that. So starting point, I think that's definitely not a thing to say because Nigerians have the right to protest. Secondly, in terms of the subsidy, I agree with CHIKE completely. When we protested in 2012, the issue very clearly at the time was the government was saying that we're unable to manage subsidy because the process is corrupt and it's not being done properly. Therefore, our solution is to remove it. And we said that you cannot blame Nigerians or poor Nigerians for your incompetence or your inefficiency. And that was the message to the Jonathan administration at that time. And CHIKE was very clear. APC members, prominent, Malame Rufai, Dino Melai, quite a number of them jumped on it at that time to sort of ride a wave of being pro-people and anti-government. Now, the shoes are on the other side, and they're singing a different tune. Actually, before they're singing a different tune, 2015, 2014, 2015, President Buhari, General Buhari at the time, was saying that subsidy was a scam, that there was no such thing called a fuel subsidy. So therefore, there was nothing to remove. It was a scam. And I guess maybe the point he was trying to make at the time was that the process of managing it was full of corruption. So when he comes in and he cleans out all the corrupt people, subsidy will make sense, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward now 5 years, he has done no such thing. So now that we're now saying we don't want to determine the price of fuel, we'll let it flow with the market price of crude oil, you are in a sense admitting that there is a subsidy and that the Nigerian government is unable to fund the subsidy. As Minister of Petroleum, as I said last week, and the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Buhari has a responsibility to Nigerian citizens to actually have a conversation and be like, you know what, I misunderstood this thing, or whatever it is you want to say, lie, say whatever, or that about your understanding of it, but engage Nigerians. But again, it follows the pattern of this administration of disregarding Nigerians. At the time when you're doing fuel, you're also doing electricity tariff. So back to Chike's point, what ideology is this government like running on? Are we socialists? Are we free markets? Are we what? Because if you keep tossing back and forth between what is driving the economy, you will keep making these mistakes. The CBN is also a classic example of what we're doing with our exchange rates. For like 4 years, the whole world was having all sorts of issues. We kept our exchange rates the same by force. And the implications of that are there for all to see. So I think that's a really very fundamental thing. The government is unclear on what mode of economy it wants to run, and Nigerians are being forced to pay that price. Now, will Nigerians protest? Most definitely. Will Labour go on strike? Most likely. And what the outcome of that will then be, will be back at this table. Because if no lesson was learned from 2012 on how to do this thing and engage and actually have honest conversations about it, then we still haven't learned anything. Lastly, on the refinery. I just wanted to say on the refinery, and that's also a classic example. We've done turnaround maintenance on this refinery easily for the last decade. And now we want to privatize it, and suddenly the Minister of State is saying, no, we are not. So, yeah.
Well, on that note, quickly, let me take Prof's input on this particular subject. Prof.
Well, let me simply ask a question. Who really is interested in turnaround maintenance? Who really? You see, the bitter truth is that those who are benefiting from subsidy will always ensure that there is no turnaround maintenance. Absolutely. When Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was president, and the issue of importation of generators was raised, Olusegun Obasanjo made strenuous effort to stop importation of generators all along. But those who are vendors of generators gathered together, they argued that they had already placed order for these generators, that the vessels are on high seas, and they should allow them to have, to take delivery before the law will come into place. Right. Now, this story is not different from refineries. Now, many people, many businessmen, stakeholders, they do not want the refineries to work.
That's right. There's a cartel.
A cartel.
Yeah.
So if you are not telling us that, okay, Nigeria, biggest oil producer, exporter, and at the same time we are importing to the tune of 100% all our refineries. The reason cannot be far-fetched. It is simply because of this factor of some people who are taking advantage of this. So this is the problem we really need to address. And in this particular case, I want to believe that if we really want to remove subsidy, and I'm not against removal of subsidy, yes. The argument had been rightly made that, the foreign exchange rate, especially given to the CBN or to the NNPC, we will no longer give them. And now about 500 billion naira budgeted in the for 2020, all right, will now be taken now and plowed to other development areas, etc. If that would be the case, the likelihood of most Nigerians benefiting from that will be there. But we know ourselves also. The issue is that the blood flowing in our capsules, in our veins, has been tainted with corruption. And now in this case, for as long as we still have these corruption tendencies in our blood, the money received taken away from one sector to another one, please, we don't have any good future about that.
Well, as Yemi pointed out earlier on, there's no doubt that we'll still come back to this table to look at further developments as Nigerians grapple with the reality of having to deal with market forces at the fuel stations. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. See you next Sunday.